There's also the fact that Constantine didn't just change the symbolism of the Roman Empire, but actually changed the law itself. He was fascinated by the idea of living according to mercy, but also acting according to justice, which was his role as the head of the state. So one of the first things he did was he exempted pastors from paying taxes. His whole idea there was that the church itself was truly a nonprofit. Its mission in terms of money was to care for the poor, to care for the widow and the orphan, to send out missions, to actually exercise the gospel in terms of worship, in terms of discipleship and teaching, in terms of the publication of great Christian text. To go along with that, he also declared Sunday to be a day of rest. Again, some complication there because it's the day of the sun, which was a god that he evidently, at least at some point, worshipped. But not only did he do those things in terms of worship, he also outlawed all state sacrifices. No longer could Roman officials actually sacrifice to the false gods in the hope that they would win their favor. He even outlawed all sacrifice in Rome itself, which led to many closures of temples. Some people critique him for basically taking away the freedom of conscience that he had talked about in the Edict of Milan, and you can make that critique. Some people praise him, though, because he's closing a place of false worship, but he was especially ending the cult prostitution that existed at so many of these temples. In fact, that would make a fascinating thesis paper to talk about what's the value of what Constantine is doing there. He didn't just affect the religion, though, of Rome. He affected the very sanctity of life, or how Rome viewed the sacredness of life itself. It was Constantine, for example, who actually ended the gladiator games, writing that bloody spectacles are not suitable for civil ease and for domestic quiet. He outlawed crucifixion, seeing as both a horrific way to put someone to death and, of course, also as being something that Christ had suffered. When it came to criminals who were often branded on the face with hot irons, he outlawed that as a type of savagery. Now, it is true, he allowed criminals to be branded elsewhere, but at least thought the face bearing the image of God should be protected. So it's not exactly the most mature, perfect Christian vision of the law, but it does show a maturing from where Rome had been. He also encouraged his soldiers to spare as many lives in battle as possible, promising them gold coins for every prisoner they took alive. When it came to slaves, he protected their lives, making it illegal for any slave to be murdered by his or her master. If they were murdered, the master would be prosecuted as an actual murderer. The slaves were also protected from severe injury and were often allowed to be freed if they were severely injured by their master. Again, you have a maturing from where things were. He even had concern for animals and made it illegal to torture animals or to use clubs on them to get them to do what you wanted them to do, say on the farm. When it came to sexual ethics, he had something to say there too. He made rape, for the first time in Roman history, something punished by the death penalty. He also changed the practices of concubinage or of prostitution by outlawing them in many different cases. When it came to divorce, it used to be that men could divorce their wives for any trivial reason. He made it so men could only divorce their wives if there had been adultery, essentially going back to the biblical commandment. And when it came to women, it's kind of funny. They couldn't divorce for adultery, which would be the biblical model. Instead, they could divorce if their husband was a murderer or a tomb robber. It seems kind of strange and kind of random, but again, we're dealing with the slow maturation of law from a Christian perspective. It's not exactly perfect. He also changed the way the law treated women. Prior to Constantine, most women did not have control over their own property. If they entered into a marriage, even if they brought with them a fortune, their husbands had full control over that. And if their husbands divorced them, they often maintained control of that property. Constantine changed that by allowing all women aged 18 and up to actually control what they themselves possessed and to make legal contracts. That means they could actually conduct business. Not only did he affect the role of women or how women were viewed by the law, but he also changed how the law viewed the poor. He demanded that there were always to be thoughtful taxes towards the poor, actually put in place fierce penalties on any tax collectors who were dishonest. He actually told his judges, he said, the ears of the judge shall be open equally to the poorest as well as to the rich. And he did away with the fees required to actually have an audience before a judge to decide your case. When it came to things such as the protection of children, he imposed a death penalty for the murder of any child. That did away with infanticide, and it also limited exposure, the idea of leaving one's child out to die. And then in 322, to encourage people to not leave their children out to die in terms of exposure, and to not even sell their children when they are, quote, preyed by calamity, as he put it, he made certain that the state in those cases would offer welfare to pay for the basic needs of the family. When it came to children born of slaves and those who were already free, he demanded that those children be treated as free. In other words, you see all of these dramatic improvements in the Roman legal system that are informed by a Christian worldview. We can critique them, we can look at them from the 21st century and say, well, they're not anything like today's laws. Of course not. We're living hundreds of years later. But the point is this, when you look at where he was coming from, this is a dramatic change, a change that the Romans themselves, most of them not thinking from a Christian worldview, most of them would have seen these changes as unnecessary or ridiculous or too merciful. That shows you something of the faith of Constantine.